obviously a lot of election law is state and local. It's not the federal government that determines everything that having to do with registration, early voting times, and things like that. But you were referencing earlier, and I think you go into in depth in your work of Florida, that there are these increasing demands on the Democrats to earn the vote effectively and to provide something in exchange for the vote afterward. Is there anything about aspirations that theoretically this time, if the Democrats control the White House, if they control the Senate again, as they did a number of years ago, that they'll take voting rights seriously and actually do something to enshrine those rights to the extent that they can federally? It doesn't seem like something the Democrats have really prioritized. They haven't seemed to have taken these voter suppression measures all that seriously in the past. Is that a thing that you've heard as a concern?
Absolutely. What we did see in terms of talking with voters is that they saw that Democrats oftentimes use them as a pawn, use them as a convenient voter bloc to visit churches, visit colleges, and pander to their communities when it's time for the election. But then the issues that impact them in terms of voter suppression, in terms of access to voting, those are issues that impact them offhand when we're not seeing a presidential election, when we're seeing midterms, when we're seeing them at the local and state level. And so Democrats have attempted to make these initiatives front and center for their campaign this time in terms of pushing for even what we see are the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which make voter registration automatic, which would increase the number of polling stations, would make voter suppression and intimidation harsher punishments in terms of federal punishment. So what we're seeing is there are efforts to address voter suppression for Black Americans, but we're 3 weeks out from an election and Black Americans already more susceptible to a virus, already disproportionately impacted by a recession, and now targeted by white vigilante and supremacist groups on account of standing up for this very right to vote. They're saying that it's a little too late, and so this is going to have to be an initiative that carries over long after Election Day.
You mentioned this generational gap of what younger Black voters might disagree in terms of what they want in terms of policy versus some older Black voters. There was I don't know if you saw the town hall with Joe Biden last week, but there was a question. I don't know if the person asking the question considers themselves a progressive, but it got a little bit into that topic. And Joe Biden went on at length about wanting to stimulate wealth creation and things like that, which is fine. Much of his appeal in the ads I've seen and all of that seems to be a return to normalcy, vote for decency, vote for, it doesn't really seem grounded in very specific economic, healthcare, like those sorts of policies. Are you seeing that the way that he's trying to appeal, contrasting himself with Donald Trump, who is that working with and to what extent? Does it seem like a good strategy from the people you've talked to?
Well, it's a hit and miss. It is working with some demographics. It is working with some voters. Clearly, there are those who are former Republicans or former Trump voters who are disenchanted with the progress of this president and in terms of the rhetoric of this president. And so appealing to decency, appealing to just an old-fashioned, what we thought was bipartisan politics, that appeals to certain voters, but that is not resonating with those who are saying, even with returning to these times, let's also talk about the racial inequities that existed in this institution that we call the United States of America that existed long before we're now seeing the presidency of Donald Trump. And so that isn't necessarily resonating. What we're seeing are younger, more progressive voters who want the party to go more bold, who want them to go lean more toward democratic socialism and policies that are going to address some of these long-standing institutional inequities that impact Black voters, as well as Latino voters, Asian voters, and what we're seeing are vulnerable groups all across the country. And so there's going to have to be a little bit more than a return to decency. There's going to be a need for bold progressive change in order to appeal to some of these progressive voters who right now are instituting their advocacy instead at the local level. We saw that in Milwaukee, we saw that in Jacksonville, where there are young progressives who are stepping forward to run for office, who are stepping forward to register voters to register residents to vote on the back end of filling out civic surveys on how voters want to spend the city budget. So at the local level, activists are getting involved and they're demanding change, and they're just waiting for the Democratic Party to catch up.
I couldn't agree more. And if anyone in the Democratic Party or the Biden campaign is watching, there's still a couple of weeks. You could still craft some ads, maybe put out a policy paper. There's still more that you could do. But Kenya, thank you once again for joining us. Really loving your work. Hopefully we can talk again before the election as you continue this very important reporting.
Again, thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.